When I first met Marcus, it seemed like I'd found a kindred spirit. It happened at the Institute during our freshman year. I still remember how he approached me in the cafeteria with that easygoing grin and said, "Hey, I'm Marcus. Looks like we'll be neighbors in philosophy lectures." I agreed, not suspecting that this encounter would turn into something meaningful. From the very first moments, we started chatting about everything: favorite movies, tunes, even childhood episodes. It felt like we were reading each other's minds on the fly. After a couple of weeks, we were spending almost every free minute together. Lab assignments, term papers, parties, seminars, Marcus was everywhere. I felt like I'd found a friend for the long haul, someone to share successes and failures with. I remember our first joint outing outside the city. We settled by the river, discussing future plans. Marcus shared his ambitions, and I poured out my doubts about my major. That was the first time I realized I relied on him more than anyone else. But even in those moments when we laughed at each other's jokes, I noticed small inconsistencies. Marcus rarely mentioned his family. When I asked about relatives or his youth, he deftly changed the subject. Sometimes his gaze would drift off, and I'd catch a slight stiffness that he tried to mask. I didn't give it much weight. Everyone has their secrets, I thought. But now, looking back, I realized that those were the first subtle signs that Marcus was hiding far more than I could imagine. At the Institute, we went through a bunch of minor skirmishes, disagreements on assignments, misunderstandings with classmates. And every time, Marcus stood shoulder to shoulder with me. He bailaid me out in tough spots, sometimes even risking his own reputation. I considered him a reliable support. But at the same time, a sense grew that he wasn't fully sincere. He never left his phone unattended, quickly hiding notifications and calls as if concealing something. I tried not to notice, convincing myself, so what, the main thing is our friendship. Our conversations often revolved around daily life, prospects, and shared hobbies. We exchanged personal stories, sometimes to such depths that it seemed like we'd known each other since diapers. And yet, the deeper I delved into his world, the more clearly I felt an impenetrable wall that he wouldn't let me past. Over time, our bond became almost familial. I invited him over, he visited me. We celebrated holidays, won competitions, debated TV shows. But sometimes, late at night when we were cracking up together, I'd catch something unusual in his eyes, like a fragment of his life remained locked away from me. I didn't call it anxiety, more like a vague discomfort that I attributed to my imagination. Marcus was an exemplary friend. He encouraged me, listened, never judged. So the idea that he might be hiding something seemed absurd. But as it often happens, those we hold dearest know how to keep secrets that can shatter trust. I didn't yet know that soon I'd discover how Marcus was concealing his criminal past. After we'd spent almost 2 years together at the Institute, our bond with Marcus evolved into something more than just chats. We became pillars for each other, sharing our most cherished ideas and dreams. But with each month, I increasingly caught myself thinking that something didn't add up about him. At first, it was trifles. He never elaborated on his past, dodging questions about family and youth. When I tried to touch on his relatives, Marcus quickly switched gears. "All right, not about the sad stuff, let's tackle the assignment instead," he'd say with a sly grin. I convinced myself it was just a personal boundary. Everyone has a right to privacy. But as time went on, I started noticing strange coincidences. One evening, while we were preparing a joint report at his apartment, I spotted an old envelope on the shelf marked "Do Not Touch." Curiosity got the better of me. Inside were some ancient papers, clearly not for prying eyes. I glimpsed protocol numbers, dates, stamps that were unfamiliar to me. At first, I didn't even grasp what it was about. "Marcus, what's this?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He snatched the envelope sharply and hid it behind his back. "Oh, that's old documents. Boring nonsense, none of your business." I agreed, though unease stirred inside. His reaction was too abrupt for ordinary embarrassment. Such incidents repeated from time to time. Marcus never let his phone out of sight, instantly masking alerts. Sometimes I'd see him react nervously to calls from unknown numbers. He avoided contacts with old acquaintances and clearly concealed aspects of his biography. One evening, we were hanging out at a bistro with mutual friends, and the conversation shifted to former neighbors and school days. One buddy suddenly dropped. "And remember how Marcus got tangled up in that mess with the authorities?" My pulse skipped a beat. "What?" I squeezed out, trying to stay cool. He just shrugged and muttered something vague, like he didn't want to delve deeper. Marcus, meanwhile, grinned and tried to change the topic. Let's talk about vacations instead." I sensed something was off, but I still couldn't admit that my friend was hiding something serious, risky. To check my suspicions, I started paying closer attention to his behavior. I noticed that Marcus often disappeared for an hour or two without explanation, sometimes showing up late looking exhausted but refusing to explain. He never mentioned old friends, and any attempt to fish for details irritated him. Deep down, I convinced myself it was just personality traits. Maybe he had his own troubles, past mistakes he didn't want to discuss. But the anxiety grew daily, and I realized that the trust our bond was built on was starting to crack. In those months, I began gathering bits of information, talking to mutual acquaintances, trying to learn more about Marcus's past. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. His mystery might be far weightier than I assumed. It happened one evening when I dropped by Marcus's to finish a joint project. His place was tidy, almost impersonal. No documents, no items that could reveal anything intimate. But this time, my eye caught a thin folder on the table with a barely visible label, "Confidential." "Marcus, what's this?" I asked, trying not to show my confusion. He immediately tensed but just smiled. "Just old papers, not your headache." My pulse quickened. I knew a misstep could break our bond, but curiosity won out. While he was distracted by a call, I carefully opened the folder. Inside lay papers I had no idea about. Court rulings, police reports, copies of indictments. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. One page had his name, date of birth, and charges of fraud and embezzlement. I reread it multiple times, unable to believe that the person I called a friend could be involved in such schemes. I felt a whirlwind of emotions inside: shock, anger, betrayal. Everything I knew about Marcus appeared as a deception. Memories of trust, joint trips, celebrations, all suddenly took on a new hue. When he returned, I tried to stay even. "Marcus, is this real?" I asked in a whisper but with a tremor. He froze, glanced at me for a moment, then replied, "Listen, that was in the past. I've changed. Please don't make a drama out of it." I nodded, but inside I was boiling. I realized that the trust built over years had collapsed. My mind swarmed with questions. Why did he hide this? What else is he keeping quiet? How many more mysteries does he hold? The next morning, I started verifying the information. I scoured online court archives, news, references to his past. It all matched up. Marcus was indeed involved in a series of illegal episodes, but on the surface, he seemed like an ordinary guy, my friend who helped in tough times. The more I learned, the clearer it became. I didn't really know this person. All the moments, conversations, and fun, it was all built on deception. And now I faced a dilemma: confront him head-on or leave things as they were. That evening I sat alone, clutching the papers. I reread the dates, claims, signatures. My heart pounded so hard it seemed the whole neighborhood could hear it. I struggled to understand what would follow. Could I ever look at Marcus as a friend again? Or was our bond now shattered forever? I realized one thing: the truth had broken free and it couldn't be stuffed back in. From then on, nothing would be the same. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every little thing, every conversation with Marcus now seemed fake. I realized that to sort it out, I'd have to gather all the puzzle pieces myself, not rely on my friend's words. First, I went back to the papers from the folder. Court verdicts, indictment documents, police certificates, all meticulously formatted, every word confirming that Marcus's past wasn't as spotless as he portrayed. I started calling mutual acquaintances he'd mentioned in passing. Trying to sound balanced, I asked about his past: education, jobs, circle. But every time the talk turned to earlier years, people either evaded or hinted that Marcus had a couple of tangled situations better left unsaid. The further I dug, the more details surfaced. I found out he'd been involved in scams with large sums, theft of documents, and even administrative violations that bordered on criminal. No one said it outright, but the facts spoke volumes. One day, I stumbled upon an old article in a regional newspaper, "Youth arrested for fraud in major company." And when I read the name, it was Marcus. I reread the piece multiple times, trying to convince myself of a mistake. But the photos, dates, details matched. It all pointed to his involvement in the crime. I didn't sleep for several nights. Every memory of our joint trips, celebrations, conversations now seemed built on deception. I struggled to comprehend. Why did he hide it? Why did he become my friend, knowing the truth could ruin everything? Soon, I decided to act systematically. Gather all papers and evidence. I made copies of verdicts, saved images of news and old records. Talked to mutual acquaintances, carefully without revealing my intentions. I asked about past years, seeking confirmations. Learned details of his offenses, dates, locations, circumstances. This helped understand how serious the past Marcus was hiding was. Each new fact sharpened the sense of betrayal. I realized that the person I trusted more than anyone was concealing serious violations that none of us suspected. But I also understood that just possessing facts wasn't enough. I needed to meet him face to face to learn why he did it and what would become of our bond. At the same time, I wrestled with internal doubts. Was it worth ruining the bond based on the past? Maybe he really had changed and was different now. These dilemmas tormented me, but I realized one thing: the truth had to be seen through to the end. Finally, having gathered all evidence and double-checked the data, I decided, time for a confrontation. But even at home, I couldn't shake the anxiety. What would his response be? Could I ever trust again the person who'd hidden his past for so long? I showed up at Marcus's that evening, clutching the neatly stacked papers in my hands. My pulse pounded so hard it seemed the whole building could hear it. I couldn't linger in uncertainty anymore. I needed to hear the truth from his lips. "Marcus, we need to talk," I said, trying to stay composed. He looked at me as if sensing the conversation would be tough. "About what?" he asked cautiously, trying to grin. I laid out the documents before him. "I know everything, your past, all these trials, courts, claims, you hid it from me. Why?" For a moment, Marcus froze. His face paled, his gaze evasive. "Listen, that was in the past," he began quietly, but I interrupted. "Past or not, you hid it for years. How can I trust you after this?" He lowered his eyes, then sighed. "I made mistakes. Yes, I got involved in crime, but that's the past. I wanted to leave it behind, become different. I wanted to be your real friend, not the guy I was before." I sat there trying to process what I'd heard. On one hand, I understood people can change. On the other, how do you build a bond on deception, even if he's changed now? "Marcus, you know trust is the foundation of everything. We've been side by side for so many years, and I thought we were true friends. And now," my voice trembled, "how can I be sure you're not hiding anything else?" He fell silent. Finally, he said quietly, "I'll understand if you don't want to deal with me anymore, but believe me, I've changed." In that moment, I felt a cocktail of anger, pain, and remorse. Everything that seemed like a solid bond turned out fragile. But at the same time, I saw before me a person who was genuinely trying to transform. We sat in silence for several minutes. I searched for the right words to convey the full spectrum of emotions: betrayal, shock, hurt, and at the same time a desire to understand. "I don't know if I can ever fully trust you," I said finally. "But I know one thing: I need to figure out if I can forgive and move on." Marcus nodded. His eyes were full of genuine regret, and in that second I realized. The truth had undermined trust, but it also cleared a path to a choice: break the bond, forever, or try to start anew. After the confrontation, I went home deep in thought. I felt betrayal, anger, and confusion battling inside me. All the moments of joint trips, celebrations, fun, now seemed like a dark veil behind which hid a stranger's biography. The next morning, I met with Marcus again. This time, we talked more calmly, but every word was deliberate. "I've realized I can't just pretend nothing happened," I began. "I understand," he replied quietly. "I'm ready for any verdict." I realized I faced a choice: preserve the bond despite the deception, or cut all ties to protect myself from potential new betrayals. We decided to gradually resume contact, but with strict boundaries. I explained that trust needed to be earned anew, and now I'd be more vigilant about his words and actions. Marcus agreed, realizing the consequences of his secrets were too heavy to simply erase. In the following weeks, I observed his behavior. He really tried to be transparent, honest, and consistent. I saw that he had changed, that the past was behind him, and that instilled hope for rebuilding the relationship. But at the same time, I felt the scar of trust that would never fully heal. Every time his secrecy came to mind, I experienced a slight stiffness, a reminder that people can hide even the darkest mysteries. After several months, we still found a new level of interaction. We weren't the same as before. Too much had been experienced, too much uncovered. But I learned a valuable lesson. The truth always surfaces, and even the strongest bonds are built on honesty. I realized that sometimes you need to face bitter truth to understand people and yourself. Trust is a delicate thing, easy to lose. But if there's genuine desire to change, rebuilding is possible, albeit with caution. This story left an imprint on me forever. I no longer take bonds for granted. I've become more vigilant about people, their pasts, and actions. And perhaps it was this painful truth that made me stronger and wiser. Several months have passed since I learned the truth about Marcus's past. I still recall that evening when I first saw the papers exposing his criminal episodes and the moment of our confrontation. Those events forever changed my view of bonds, trust, and people in general. I often wondered why Marcus hid his past. Maybe he feared losing friends, maybe he just wanted to start from scratch. But one thing became clear: a person can't fully remake the past by hiding it from those who rely on him. My bond with Marcus will never return to what it was, but I've learned to value honesty and openness above all. I realize that trust isn't a given, but a process that needs to be protected and continuously reinforced by actions. Sometimes I've revisited my memories, those fun nights, trips, laughs we shared. It was hard to sort out what were authentic emotions and what was a screen for hiding the truth. And yet, I realized that real feelings and moments endure, even if overshadowed by mystery. This story taught me another thing: people can evolve, but their past remains part of them. We must be ready to accept that if we want to build authentic relationships. And sometimes the pain caused by uncovering a mystery becomes a precious lesson that helps better understand ourselves and others. Now, looking back, I understand. The truth always surfaces. Hiding it means risking the undermining of trust built over years. But if there's genuine desire to change, a chance for rebuilding relationships exists, even if not immediately. I decided not to harbor resentment and give Marcus a chance to prove he can be an honest friend. But I've also learned to be cautious and attentive, not to ignore small signs that might signal hidden issues. In the end, this story left an imprint on me forever. I've become more vigilant about people, their pasts, and actions. I've learned to value honesty and trust, but now I know they're easy to lose and hard to regain. And the most key thing: I realized that every person, regardless of past mistakes, deserves a chance at redemption if they're ready to take responsibility for their actions. But a bond built on deception always requires reevaluation, sometimes painful, sometimes salvific.